I have drafted and put in front of you and out back for the public a proposed short-term rental ordinance. There's been a lot of discussion that has come to the council before about one or two issues that we've had in town. Certainly, we don't have the issues that a Guilford or a Meredith have in terms of, or a Hampton, in terms of people renting party houses, so to speak, and keeping their neighbors up all night. But believe it or not, people do rent, on a short-term basis in Londonderry, and until now, we've been essentially powerless to address that, other than through the existing tools like the noise ordinance. This is something that I anticipate we will not use every day, but it would be nice to have in place if and when we do need it. And as I said, we've heard recent complaints about this very issue. The ordinance is not anywhere near as extensive as some of the ordinances that you would find in the Lakes region or on the seacoast. It's merely essentially a registration ordinance. If you're going to rent your property on a short-term basis, we want to know that you're doing that. We want to know who we can contact after hours if there's a problem. And it essentially just puts the owner on, on notice that they're responsible for any violations of the noise ordinance that take place at the rented property. It's not even here for a first reading this evening. It's here for your input, for your consideration, and I'm certainly open to any feedback about it. But it really is intended to have as light a touch as possible, but just to create a framework for us to address these issues if and when they do arise.
A couple questions for you, Mr. Town
Yes.
Manager. Actually, direction and then a question. If you could please have our town council just review this.
Certainly.
In compliance with state law and everything, and just provide maybe a one-page memo for the council and public.
Happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
Their analysis of that. Fees associated with this. So when I mean fees, everything has a cost. Time has a cost. Staff time has a cost. And I'd like to have maybe not necessarily. Actually, I'm going to pause on that because I feel that might be digging a little bit too deep in operational, which Charter is very clear on that. But maybe a conversation on your analysis on potential staff cost and if that should be like an application fee or not. And then lastly, I see violation, a fine of $1,000 for each day, the violation. Can you please talk a little bit more of those violations, please?
Certainly. So basically what this references is existing state law that makes it a violation, which is, it's not a criminal offense. It is it's a speeding ticket. It's equivalent to a speeding ticket in terms of the level of the offense. And violating any town ordinance is a violation, and it's subject to those penalties of up to $1,000 a day. Or if there's a lesser penalty that's noted, then that would be the penalty. But really what this does is it just says, look, if you are violating this ordinance, here's this existing law that gives us the ability to enforce that. What is a violation of the ordinance? Renting on a short-term basis without obtaining a permit. So if we had someone who just was going to fly under the radar and think that, well, I'm going to do it until I get caught, well, that's a violation of the ordinance because we have a requirement. And then the only other stated violation of the ordinance would be a violation of the town's noise ordinance that's taking place at the property. So the noise ordinance is very limited in scope because there are a lot of constitutional protections around any kind of speech. And I think that our noise ordinance recognizes that what is offensive to one person might not be offensive to another person. So it has to be offensive to the reasonable person in order to violate the noise ordinance. I can't remember the last time we issued a citation for a noise ordinance violation. Very rare. But, in the example that I heard about this week from a resident, having a house full of 20 people and setting fireworks off in a dense neighborhood at 1 a.m, that probably constitutes a violation of the noise ordinance. So that's really, it's supposed to be as light a touch as possible so that people know what the standard is and what the penalty is.
How do we, so for other violations of ordinances, how do we enforce that? And what are the legal options past notice of violation and say, hey, you owe us money?
Yeah. So the strongest stick, if you will, is injunctive relief, and that exists under state law. So if there is a code violation, a junkyard, an illegal junkyard situation, or a significant issue with a property, we would go to court, and we would ask the court to essentially order the owner to bring the property into compliance. That often comes with legal fees that are shifted by state law. I think it would be
recoverable.
Yes. Actually, in that kind of a proceeding, the presumption is that if the town is, in fact, I think it may be the rule that if the town is successful in obtaining that kind of relief, that the legal fees are paid by the property owner who's in violation. And there have been multiple instances over my time with the town where courts have awarded those fees to the town on the theory that you shouldn't have to pay for your neighbor's code violation, because ultimately this gets borne by the taxpayers.
Okay. Anything further or any other questions?
So the one thing I see that you might have an issue with right here is section 5, with notice required, just because there are short-term rentals where people actually live in them and they may be gone for a certain amount of time, so they're not going to want to put a sign on their house. There's also, it goes to the look and feel of it. A lot of times when people do short-term rentals, they want to feel like they're in a house, and it's a little thing, but can be a big thing. And I know particularly out in the Seacoast area, they don't have anything like that when their short-term rental ordinance. So just something to think about.
I think that's a good suggestion. And I think, as long as we have a contact, an after-hours contact, I think we have what we need.
Have we seen an uptick in complaints regarding short-term rentals?
I've seen an uptick of 1 in the past week, but it's the same neighborhood that we all have talked about. The neighbors are fairly exasperated. It's a different set of neighbors this time, and so it's hard for me to say. I mean, we've been, we were successful in mitigating that situation until we weren't, which has now occurred.
Mm-hmm. The thing I find curious about that is it would be in the owner's best interest not to rent to people who are going to make noise complaints party. Their likelihood of damaging the property is increased. So that's
correct.
I think
interesting.
There's a lot of factors regarding that. Duration, how many occupants? Obviously, if you have a 1-bedroom, as mentioned, you want to rent out a room on a short-term rental platform, that would yield, that could sleep 2 people, that would yield a different volume and probably have no complaints versus a single property that might have 50, occupancy of 50. So I think there's definitely those considerations. You were going to say something?
Well, just that I really think that we're talking about a handful of properties in town that are probably being rented out regularly on a short-term basis. I don't think that this is a systemic problem or except to the people who have to deal with it.
Had there been, excuse me, being involved in the previous complaint, had there been any new attempts to reach out to the property owner?
Yes, I made that request to the police department, and I don't have an update.
Any further update?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else from the council? So, yeah, so, Ron?
No, I'm good.
So I think consideration to Section 5, as Councilor Faber stated, and just for clarification, this is something that we're going to have first reading.
Correct.
Second reading.
Or if,
proper-
that's right. If you
wait,
tell me,
wait.
go, don't bring it back, I won't bring it back as well. It's really, again, I'm in the spirit of like, we're dealing with a lot of these things where like we haven't been good necessarily about keeping up with our regulations or refreshing our regulations over time. I really think it's important to at least have the discussion. I had some time over the weekend to put this together and do a little bit of research. So it's really in that spirit that I brought it here.
Is this something, so I've observed other towns that this would go through the planning board for input. Is that standard? Again, different charter, different regulations, same state law, but
It's a great question. It doesn't. So it's a short-term rental ordinance is not a land use ordinance.
Okay.
But it does affect land use to a certain extent. So I think the planning board would probably be happy to have a discussion about it. There may be people on there who have some expertise that we could access. So I'd be certainly happy to refer to the planning board for a recommendation as well.
So before we get consensus from the council, I just want to point out just the importance of, as the town manager stated, it's not required, but it would also allow another opportunity, as they would, correct me if I'm wrong, have public input for this as well.
Yes, they could choose to have a public hearing.
Okay. A potential opportunity for a public input, and then we would have a public hearing for this as well, allowing the public to opine. So,
Because I'd be interested in hear what our real estate agents have to say.
well, I can think of one that probably has plenty of.
Planning board's been asking for this for 2 years.
So, Sean, excuse me, Sean, you were going to say something. It
Oh,
looked like you were-
One thing that I hear frequently is not just noise complaints with short-term rentals. So I want to make sure that we have a mechanism where, because I think you had just said there's not really a lot of noise complaints that get enforced now. We have a mechanism that addresses all noise complaints, not just from short-term rentals, because that is a thing I hear periodically. And so if we already have an ordinance in place, just extending it to this may not result in what we're looking for. So if we can think of a better way to take care of that overall for everyone, that would be great.
That's a good observation, and I may talk with the police department. I think the noise ordinance is worth a look as well, to make sure we all understand it and the public understands it, and to see if it can be tweaked as well.
What is the council's consensus on having this go before the planning board prior to the council?
I mean, I think technically this falls under us, right?
It
Not
does.
them.
It does.
But I'm trying to figure out what's the best way on that.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm fine with dealing with it here.
Yeah.
I'd just like to
Yeah.
hear some public opinion.
Yeah.
I'd like to do my own research too and find out what's going on with it.
And maybe the better way to do that would be to have it at the town council and invite the planning board as public comment members on it.
Yeah.
Or is it sort of a joint session on it?
I would say invite for public comment. I mean, we just had a discussion at the planning board about boards kind of stretching beyond their purview. And I feel like it touches land use, but I don't know if it's in, out, and that's a hard one.
I mean, as the town manager said, it's a tricky situation. It's
It
not
is.
quite land use.
Yeah.
And I will say, I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but I just could not be happier with the cooperation between the planning board and my staff.
Yeah.
I don't think that relationship has ever been better.
Agreed.
And I think that you have a planning board that is looking to cooperate not only with me and my staff, but also with the town council and to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So it's a lot of new energy. Everybody's swimming in the right direction. I think if you invite the planning board to come, you're going to get a lot of good feedback.
I think we should do that. Invite public opinion, and if the public doesn't say that they need it, then then it goes away. If they say we need it, then we move forward.
Right.
Do we know when the next planning board meeting is?
I think it's October 4th.
Okay, so I guess my only request would be that our second reading slash public,
I'm sorry, the 7th.
okay,
No, I'm all screwed up. It's the 2nd, yeah.
thank you. So I guess my only request is to have the second reading after the, a planning board meeting, if the chairman chooses to invite members of the planning board and let
Certainly.
them know. So if you could collaborate with the chair.
By all means.
And just let him know our timeline, so that he could inform the planning board. Again, to be perfectly clear, land use and council, two totally different things. So just to come to our meeting to discuss input and suggestions, not have it on their agenda.
Certainly. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, anything else?
I guess, he mentioned, noise as a whole. Say, for example, if people are hearing fireworks late into the night, who are we calling? Are we calling the
Call the
police, the
police.
fire department?
Call the police. Yeah.
Call the police. I mean, what if you don't know?
Unless they're
or
hitting your
see them?
house, then you probably should go.
But like, what if you can't see what direction they're coming from? Are you just gonna say, I hear
PD.
fireworks
Yeah.
going off right now?
Yep.
Like,
Yep. You could call the police. I mean,
What is quiet hours?
I think it's 10, isn't it?
10 o'clock. I can't recall when they end, but it's the same with gunfire. The PD often responds to calls for gunfire.
Conduct their own
They're pretty good at figuring out where it's coming from. But
Okay.
yeah, I would call the police.
Because certainly within like the past 2 months, I've been hearing fireworks going off late into the night, and I'm like, great, I hope my son doesn't wake up from that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone else
Yep.
is thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's fortunately we're turning the it's starting to get dark early, but yeah, it seems like people love to set off their fireworks when the sun goes down. So, so that I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I
No.
don't-
So you have the direction with reaching out with Megan Courier, Attorney Courier, on that and providing just a one sheet analysis, and then
Absolutely.
okay, all right.